Okay, let's go ahead and get the show on the road. So hello, everyone, and welcome to the Computational Toxicology Communities of Practice. My name is Sammy Hamp. I am a public affairs specialist in the Center for Computational Toxicology and Exposure. Today, we're going to be hearing about the latest Chemicals Dashboard update from Dr. Antony Williams. And before we get started, I just want to ask everyone to please mute their lines. You can accomplish that by hitting #6. And then without any further ado, I will hand it over to Dr. Williams.
Thank you very much, Sammy. Hello, everybody. I hope everybody is doing well under the present conditions. This presentation was actually a little at risk because of some of the challenges we have faced pushing out the latest release of the dashboard. Working from home, being isolated, of course, accessing systems that are hyper-dependent on remote access, etc. But ultimately, electrons will flow if you have the right permissions, and thanks to the efforts of the IT team at CCTE, we've managed to get this release out very recently. So today's outline, I'm going to give you a short history of the dashboard. It's been around about 5 years. What is it presently being used for? And I am going to assume some familiarity for most of the people on this call watching this presentation. It's been around long enough. We've given a lot of presentations out to the center, and I'm sure people are generally aware of it. So I'm not going to give you a deep overview. I'm going to give you some views of what it's being used for, new capabilities, new data we've added, lists that we've recently integrated. I'm going to talk about linkages, both outbound and inbound, that are proving to be of value. I'm going to talk about how we are contributing to data quality with our efforts, and actually how you can contribute also as a user. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the prototypes in progress and what's the next big change. We are all, of course, hoping for the next big change to be a decline in the number of COVID cases, so we can all get back to face-to-face work. But this big change is going to be more focused on what are we up to right now with development for the dashboard. So an upfront acknowledgement and thanks to everybody who has contributed. I get to give the presentations. I get gratitude and thanks for the presentations, but I have to acknowledge I am one small member of an enormous team that has contributed to the development of this application over the past few years. So we used to be NCCT, of course. We are now CCTE, and we have an extensive IT development team for the dashboard that has changed over the years. Many of the people who initiated its development have come and gone. We have a new team that is in place right now. Turnover can be fairly significant in these projects, but we still keep moving forward. And for those of you who use the application, you shouldn't notice the difference. The principal investigators and postdocs at NCCT and now CCTE who have spent so much of their time building models, gathering data, validating data, pushing together their own databases into a form that we could consume into the application that you are using. And then also sincere thank you to the curation team, both the one over the years as well as the one we have now, who work every day to ensure that we get chemicals mapped into the system. We also have many collaborators across the agency, and they work to provide us with data sets that we can use for mapping up to rich resources across the agency. Many collaborators are testing and cross-linking data sets, both inside the agency as well as external to the EPA across the world at this point. We also thank those of you who have contributed data sets for registration to add to the list that we have available and to enrich the availability of data and cross-linking to many of these applications. And to many of you who provide us support by giving us feedback, by suggesting ways that we could improve the usability and extend the application for your purposes, as well as the general communities. So thank you to everybody who has contributed. And as I say, I'm one small member of the team. So a very short history of the dashboard. First, the Earth cooled, and then came some early dashboard applications that were running inside NCCT for a number of years. And one of these, top left-hand corner, is Actor. Let me bring up, here. So ACTA is still running. That's been around for a number of years now. We did have the ToxCast dashboard, the EDSP21 dashboard, and then CPCAT, which is the Chemical Product Categories application. This is actually still online, but you will hear why it will be going away shortly. So these are the earlier dashboard applications. Building a dashboard inside our center is nothing new. We just got to learn from so many of the previous efforts. We got to reuse many of the efforts that had gone past. They did a heavy lift in terms of understanding how to bring data together and how it could be best delivered to the community. If you go to comptox.epa.gov right now, that is the landing URL for this particular portal. And those earlier dashboards, ToxCast dashboard, top right, and the EDSP dashboard, you will find when you click on them that they've actually been retired. Both served incredibly valuable purposes for the center and for the community, but they have now been discontinued. And a lot of work has been done working with the people who developed those originally to migrate data capability functionality into the CompTox Chemicals Dashboard, and to build on that early work and enrich it for what we deliver today. That particular portal, the CompTox Chemicals Dashboard, is on the top left, and if you simply append the term dashboard to the end of that base URL, you will also get to the dashboard. So this is commonly a landing page that people will come into. We'll mention ACTA a little bit later. We'll talk about RapidTox somewhat, and we will talk about the downloadable data we have available. So the dashboard, in summary, it has search capabilities, and you have three types of search. I will show what they are. We have toxicity data. This is efforts of Richard Judson and many of his workers that have worked with him to pull together a rich data set called ToxVal. Bioactivity data, so this is the in vitro data set that was originally pushed out through EDSP21 dashboard and ToxCast dashboard, has now been migrated into this application. We have basic cheminformatics searches that provide immediate value with a single button click. You can do similarity searches. We have a read across module built into the application. This is from colleagues Grace Patlowitz and Imran Shah. This is still in beta form for this release. But it has been very successful for a number of people to apply this tool in action. It's actually a workflow inside the application. Nancy Baker has built an integration using Abstract Sifter to pull data out of PubMed, to query and to sift through the data in real time. So that's hitting 30 million abstracts at this point, and that number of abstracts grows daily. And then not only are we a single chemical house, we're actually a batch search. So if you had 1,000 CAS numbers, 1,000 names, 1,000 formulae, then you can perform a batch search and pull back data. So this is a summary view of what we've been building. So what is the dashboard used for at present? And it's hard to cover every usage. There's so many discussions that have happened over the years where people have specific focused reasons for using the dashboard. But I'll give you some general views of what that is, and also a little bit about what's new in what the dashboard is being used for. So with this release, the dashboard has grown. We're at 882,000 chemicals. This is the chemicals search right here. So it's a type ahead search. I have presented previously in our prototype efforts regarding structure substructure search that is not integrated into this release, but we are making great progress on extending that capability. However, just to show you the growth in DSS Tox, which is the underpinning database that was started initially by our colleague Anne Richard, and she worked very hard with some very small team of curators to grow the data set, but it took many years to get it to the highest level of curation, 1,000 chemicals. Then we had a leap in the number of chemicals when Chris Grolke, who's a key member of the team, came in and built up a chemical registration system and started harvesting data, cross-referencing data, checking data using automated curation approaches to grow the data set dramatically. And you can see this step function that occurred right here to get us to about 750,000 chemicals. Since then, we add data every single day. We do some large depositions of data based on specific data sets. It's likely that this is going to be related to a TSCA registration or something of that nature. It's difficult for me to recall. But here we are today. Internally, we have crossed the 900,000 chemical substance registration. So there's a cat calling to me. 900,000 chemicals, and I do like cats, so that's good. 900,000 chemicals on the internal system, 882,000 chemicals on the public system. So we do keep some chemicals back that we are not ready yet to release because we need to move through some additional curation. So with this release, we did leap by about 7,000 new chemicals from the last release. We also have the product use categories search. So you can come in, just click on this tab and start typing hair color. And this is related to the effort that was originally CPCAT, and that application is still online. But there has been a sincere effort to grow this data set dramatically. The CPDAT data set that was originally built is available as a download. There is a Nature Scientific Data publication. You can go pull the data down. But with this release, we took advantage of the efforts that are going on internally, and I will show you the new application that's being built for internal purposes to massively grow the data set that is public. So there are now data associated with almost 600,000 consumer products now in the database. It's under constant curation and expansion. That work continues every day, and as usual, those data don't go out until I will tell you more shortly about how often we will be releasing moving forward. But you can see here a list of product names, weight fraction details, source of the data, and for methylparaben, we have 462 records associated. So the factotum database has been built to harvest, manage, curate, map, integrate all of the data together that released out in this version of the application. It has involved us taking this new data format, because there's a whole new data schema here, and mapping it back to the old format that we had for this release. So all of the possible capabilities that would come with this data schema did not turn up in this version of the application. I will explain what we will be doing with that moving forward. But we have moved this into the old format to release it. But there are over 500,000 documents, close to 600,000 products, 3.9 million extracted chemicals, and 1.9 million records have been curated at this point. So we still have a lot of curation to do. It does map onto a total of 27,000 DTX SIDs. Those are substance identifiers. And I will tell you how powerful that identifier has become as we move forward. So this is the internal database. There may be a shift in the future to make that publicly accessible. For now, the data are made available through the dashboard, but it has some beautiful visualization tools so that you can actually see how the data breaks down, what the subsets are, how it all maps together. That's factotum. We also have in here, because we have brought in the bioactivity data, the in vitro DB database, managed primarily by Katie Paul Friedman today and a team that she works with. The assay gene searches remain there. The data are available for you to search. And with this release, we've increased the data again. So the growth in the database from 2015 to 2020 is shown below. And this shows you with the public release versions that we have, there was a period of about 3 years where we were not managing to release data. Once we mapped everything over into the CompTox Chemicals Dashboard, then a very sincere effort was made to make sure that with future releases of the dashboard and on an annual basis, we were releasing new data. So you can see the growth in the number of assay endpoints over the years, the number of chemicals that grow, the number of curve fit chemical assay endpoint pairs that has happened. So in this release, we've got another 140 assay endpoints, 700 new chemicals added. The data has been re-pipelined with new fitting procedures, and we've got about 200,000 new curve fits released with this version, and another 140 assay endpoints are now annotated to genes. So again, I get to give the presentation, but please understand the incredible amount of work that goes on in the background to serve these data to the dashboard so that we can deliver it to you. Some examples of usage now. So these are some of the conversations I have on a fairly regular basis where people don't realize some of these searches are available and how useful they have become to people. So I show some of these examples just as a means to indicate there is a lot of capability here that you might not be using. So as an example, you might be interested to find every chemical that has an identifier, a label, a name that contains the term conazole. So when you choose to do a substring search on the term conazole, then you return 125 chemicals with the term conazole in it. And then from here, you have all of the capabilities that you would have in the dashboard. Click on the chemical name, takes you into that unique chemical structure. Now you can start reviewing all of the available data, whether there is toxval data, bioactive data. In this case, it tells you there is ToxCast data available. Been studied in 79 assays, 11 active hit calls. There's somebody speaking. If you could please mute yourself, that would be great. Thank you. From here, you could also send your chemicals over to a batch search, and now you could take advantage of the batch search to identify what lists these chemicals are in, whether or not there is bioactivity data available, harvest, predicted phys-chem properties, fate and transport, etc. Conazoles is an example, but right now I'm working on a project about UVCBs regarding rosins, and to query on rosin and see what is returned. It's a great way for us to quickly surface chemicals. And if you wanted to quickly find all perfluoro chemicals, type in the substring perfluoro. And if an identifier mapped to those perfluorochemicals, both structure and non-structured, exists, it will bring back that set of chemicals. So it's a very, very useful search that doesn't get used by too many. This is an example. If you use the product use search, so that second type of search I pointed out, and you want to know what's in eyeliner. So go to that search box, type in eyeliner. It will show you what categories are available. Click the button and it will bring up, in this case, a set of 35 chemicals. Look for diapers, look for hair color. All of these are a good way, using all of the data that has been harvested through Factotum and updated for 588,000 products today into the application. Will pull all of that for you in a simple search. The in vitro bioactivity data we've mentioned already, so this is where the gene and assay searches come to bear. These are the visualization tools that we are able to emulate from the earlier efforts of the ToxCast and EDSP21 dashboard. So the data are here, and it includes this summary view of the data. Below this, for this chemical, is going to be a full table of all of the data that have been measured. So active, inactive, hit calls, the AC50 values, all of the details you would want about how those assays have been measured. That detail is all sitting in either the assay descriptions right here or in assay modals, so a pop-up screen that tells you an awful lot about that assay. There are articles published on it in PubMed. What are the chemicals that have been studied in that particular assay, et cetera, et cetera. So a rich data view of the bioactivity data, to the point where we will show you the individual dose response curves for a particular chemical. So for bisphenol A, what I've done here is I've selected the active hit calls. It's gone through the hundreds and hundreds of assays that this chemical has been measured in, and shows you the dose response curves. There are 217 charts here that you can view. You can dive deeply into each one of them. You can download the relevant data, et cetera, et cetera. So a deep view into those data. The read across module, as I mentioned, built internally and released as a beta module, allows you to run a read across process to the point where you are actually looking at toxicity data at an organ specific level. Multiple publications on this application now out there. It is a full workflow. It's interactive. You make decisions as you go through. And this is truly one of the very, very powerful workflows that is embedded in the dashboard. And you'll hear more about workflows and how we intend to add more of those as we go. I think of the batch search also as a workflow. It's more interactive. You make decisions, you select a lot more information about what you would like to gain access to. For every chemical, we do our utmost to map what we're terming transformation products. These could be metabolites, degradants in the environment. For polymers, you would have the monomers that make up that polymer. In this case, there's a project that is underway at the moment to look at azo dyes. And what we're showing here is the chemical aniline. And many of these azo dyes cleave in the environment, and they produce these aromatic amines that are of concern, specifically highlighted by REACH. So aromatic amines are of concern. When we look at aniline, it is telling you that this particular chemical has multiple azo dye parents that produce aniline in the environment. These will be reported in the literature, in databases, many publications pointing to this. So we've been working a lot for the last release on adding these mappings in. This is an example of a Marcouche representation. So this is where the actual chemical of interest can have different chain length, in this case C10 to C16. It could be substituted at multiple positions, orthometa-para, on the benzene ring. It's a benzene sulfonic foundation. So as a result of searching on this chemical, you find various components that are in the dashboard already inside DSS Tox that are mapped. You also find other Marcouche representations where the benzene sulfonic acid can be substituted across the chain. This is a symmetrical chain, so it's not going to, you don't need to draw it across the whole chain, etc. So our handling of UVCB chemicals is very complex. We are doing all of the foundation work underneath, and you get to take advantage of all of this work that we're doing to solve this complex problem. This is not just distinct structures, but these complex materials that we have to deal with. We do a lot of work to ensure that the identifiers that are mapped to a particular chemical are available to support searches. So if you come to the dashboard and you happen to search on a CAS registry number that is deleted, might have been in commerce for a number of years and then came out of commerce for a long time ago, then you would want to be able to find these chemicals by these retired identifiers. So we do have deleted CAS numbers, active CAS numbers. This is the active CAS number here for bisphenol A, 80057. A chemical can have hundreds of identifiers, so we can't validate every single one of them. It's just too much work when you have 882,000 chemical substances, some of them with hundreds and hundreds of identifiers. So we have certain ones that we validate using human curation as well as tools. So for example, we would take these systematic names, and we would use tools to convert them and check back to the originating structure and make sure they're consistent. We also have other identifiers such as Beilstein numbers and different levels of quality. So valid, good, and as you scroll down, you just get to normal. So they're not validated at any real level, but present for you to search. These synonyms become incredibly powerful because we can use them then to perform searches against other external resources. So consider Google Books, Google Patents, Google Scholar, PubMed, etc., etc. These identifiers become very useful, and an example of using that is the abstract sifter module that has been built in. I mentioned Nancy Baker, who originated this particular tool, and then since then we have integrated it into the dashboard. It's also available as an Excel tool, so you can download it from the dashboard. There's a publication regarding this particular tool. And here's an example where I have retrieved dioxin right here, done a search on any relationship between dioxin and cancer. When I selected cancer from the particular query here, it pulled this query directly from the database. We know what the CAS number and the name as well as the mesh name would be. So those could come in from our own system, and then what it does is it appends this particular query to that. In a fraction of a second, it has highlighted the fact that there are 1,500 articles almost associated with this on PubMed. It's downloaded them in real time, and then what I'm doing is I'm filtering on the terms dioxin, cancer, and mortality. It's got frequency counts in the abstract, and then I can click on the PubMed ID to access that article on PubMed. If I choose to keep any of these articles, I can select them in these checkboxes, send that data set directly to an Excel file, or actually push it back to PubMed in order to download an appropriate file to use in EndNote and tools such as that. So Abstract Sifter, incredibly rich capability. We've used it in a number of projects at this point to serve a number of specific needs, and it's turned into an incredibly valuable part of the dashboard and built there for you to access and utilize. We do analytical chemistry inside the EPA, of course, and use mass spectrometry a lot to do different types of analysis. So we do suspect screening and non-targeted analysis, etc., to detect the chemical environment. And because we've been building up a rich data set of chemicals, those that have chemical structures registered into the application automatically have formulae and masses generated. So we have built on the availability of those data to provide mass searches. So you can input a mass and an error for formula searches, and you can even input a mass and generate the formulae that could exist for that mass, and it will search across the entire application based on that mass to find all formulae that match and give you those linkages. You don't have to worry about just neutral chemicals. You can select, do a mass search, and take into account all potential adducts, so sodiated adducts, ammoniated adducts, etc., etc. Loss of carbon dioxide. So those can all be taken into account. And the formulae searches that we've delivered, it's not just an exact formula search, because if you looked for a specific hydrochloride salt, the exact formula would have HCl in it. If you looked for a sodium salt, what you would detect by mass spectrometry could be the neutral or the sodiated form, but you would want to do the search on the neutral rather than always assuming the presence of sodium in the formula. So we have built this specific form of the chemicals called MS Ready. So mass spec ready, standardization of every chemical substance with a structure into a specific form for supporting these searches. This has become a very powerful part of the search that we provide. It's an idea that we had many years ago to build this capability, and it's now critical to our progress. This is an example of performing a mass search here, 191.131 plus or minus 5 ppm molecular weight. So when it's done here, it's retrieved 335 chemicals, and it's done it based on every single chemical that has a structure inside the database. These MS Ready structures that I'm explaining to you, that we've published on it, it's gone through very rigorous testing. We have a number of groups across the world now starting to adopt this approach, utilize our MS Ready forms of data for purposes. Pretty much this summarizes what MS Ready means. So when you take nicotine without stereochemistry in our application, this MS Ready form of nicotine will map to the L form of nicotine, the D form, different stereo forms, the stereo form plus hydrochloride. So it's now a salt form. You've got an isotopically labeled form. And while we understand the mass would be different because it's deuterated, it's isotopically labeled, we still feel there is a value to de-isotope to get this mapping in place. And because this also helps you identify all forms of a chemical in the application, not just ones that are based on similar and the same mass. This is a multi-component form where you have nicotine, again with stereochemistry, as well as being present with a second component. Each one of these maps directly into the de-stereoed, desalted, de-isotoped form of the chemical. And that's our MS-ready form. So when you do that, along for the ride comes some very powerful capabilities that are simply available to you with a single click. So as an example, I start with silver PFOA, and I want to find both the neutral form of this as well as all the other related salts. So in the application, if you come down to linked substances, it will allow you to see mixtures, components, and isotopomers. It will find the PFOA form of this directly mapped to all of its salts, all of its isotopically level. So with one click, you have 22 chemicals visible. You can see various salts here. This is the neutral form. You see ammonium salts, etc. 6 of them are actually invisible because they're isotopically labeled. And when you close this filter, then there's 6 additional isotopes. And it tells you directly the isotopically labeled, filtered out. One click. For any chemical, those MS-ready forms are mapped directly to the chemical that you're interested in, and that immediately speeds up your access to various forms of that chemical through the entire application. We also have had in here for almost 3 years now real-time predictions. So this is taking advantage of the work of Todd Martin, a colleague who works out of our Cincinnati office. And he built something called TEST, which is the toxicity estimation software tool. This application allows you to draw a chemical of interest and predict all of these toxicological and physical chemical property endpoints in real time. So what I've done here is I've typed in atrazine to retrieve the chemical structure atrazine, which I have then adjusted. I've added a phenyl ring here, and I've added this side chain. So this chemical may or may not be inside the database. I won't know until I actually perform a search and see whether there's any data available. All of these will be generated in real time. I click calculate, and it pulls back. It forms 4 modeling predictions in real time. Then it gives us a consensus value. Not all modeling approaches will give you values, but you still get the consensus value out. Notice there are no experimental data available for these, but if you click on this hyperlink, it opens up a full report showing you the most similar chemicals that are being used to do the prediction.
Hey, Tony.
Yes.
Your audio is kind of going in and out a little bit right now.
Not sure what I can do. Internet is, I don't know how to stabilize it.
I mean, you could possibly think about like trying to call in. Let us know in the chat if it's like pervasive and bad for you. If you want Tony to do that, but otherwise we can just keep going as is, because it's mostly intelligible, I would say. Okay.
All right. If it continues, let me know and I will call in.
Cool.
So now some new capabilities, data and lists that have shown up with this latest release. So as I said, we've got 882,000 chemicals. You can always look into our latest news. And with the latest news, you will see this 10th release now live. This went live on July 12th. So as I say, we were a little concerned to make it in time for this presentation, but we just squeezed under the wire. And if you want to see everything, you can click on the release notes right here. And you will find a list of bugs that are fixed, and all I'm highlighting right here is the new functionality that we have added in. And to be honest, with some of the challenges we faced getting this release out, we did not make the significant leaps in capability that we generally make with a release. So did get a lot of bug fixes done, and the biggest enhancement, I would say, the addition of this safety tab. So on the left-hand side, for over 100,000 chemicals, you will find safety data, which is taking advantage of the established relationships we have with other federal agencies, as well as the fact that we all do our best to provide systems that are integratable, that can be reused, repurposed. So what we've done here is we've got a mapping between our chemicals and a PubChem ID. This is the CID 2256. And because we have mapped that in our database, by registering our chemicals inside PubChem, by harvesting back the PubChem CIDs, we can form that linkage. And now we take advantage of the fact that we can load that part of the PubChem interface directly into our application. So these are PubChem data pulled in real time into our application. We do the same in bioactivity. We pull the bioactivity screening data from PubChem into the application. Same again for PubChem. There are now over 260 lists available. I added one more last night. These lists can be added at any time, if provided that all of the chemicals are already public. If not, we will make a partial list. The lists range in everything from a set of 3 chemicals to over 62,000 chemicals. 27 different PFAS lists now. Many with structures, some with just PFAS chemicals that don't have chemical structures. They are substances, polymers, etc., but they don't have structures. Many lists. And we are adding lists on an ongoing basis to support specific programs. So as an example of that, we've got interest at the moment in disinfection byproducts. So the last version of the dashboard had 82 disinfectant byproducts highlighted. With this version, after meeting with Susan Richardson down in South Carolina, we worked together to harvest the data directly from her most recent review article, map and curate that into the application. So with this release, we now have 169 identified chemicals that are disinfectant byproducts. We took advantage of a collaborator whose job it is to work in DBPs to make sure that they stay on top of the latest research on the literature. We don't have the time to do this for every list, so we took advantage of the work, and as a result, she gets back a list of curated chemicals plus access to all of the data that we have, toxicity data, bioactivity data, etc., plugged in. Another one would be pulling up a consolidated list of lists for APCRA, CIRCLA, CAA. This is the June 2019 version. This list of chemicals, again, once we register it in here, we get to now use this as a flag for whether or not certain chemicals are available in these regulatory lists. So the registration of the list has a very selfish purpose. It becomes incredibly empowering for us to very quickly tell whether or not chemicals are in certain lists. Wikipedia at this point contains about 21,000 chemicals. Having worked on Wikipedia curation for a period of 3 years and seen numerous errors in the data, we work very slowly through doing the curation to get the mappings in place. And we have almost 13,000 chemicals in total that are now mapped. And there is a side benefit for us to do this. When we register these chemicals, when we know they're in Wikipedia, underpinning Wikipedia is a wiki data site, which is fully open data that contains toxicity data, property data, names, all for this Wikipedia assembly. So we get to take advantage of what's in the open source domain that we can pull in at our whim. And there's one more benefit. When we have a mapping between a chemical on the dashboard and a Wikipedia article, then we can pull the snippets that you see at the top of the page for a particular chemical. So that is pulled in real time from Wikipedia and displayed. So we only have about almost 13,000 of these snippets. Certainly every chemical that we have is not in Wikipedia. That wouldn't make sense actually. But the vast majority of them have been registered into Wikidata, and I will tell you more of the benefits of that shortly. Other lists of interest include storage tanks above ground and underground. Iris Chemicals has been updated to over 600 chemicals. We were missing a few tens of chemicals. Azo dyes, as I said, is a project of interest right now. Curated CASME data sets we recently published on using our mass spec tools, MS Ready tools, and some of our predicted fragmentation data to identify chemicals in 5 years of contests that were run. And our approach, the dashboard, served very, very good results and performed at the level of all of the contest winners without issue. So that is already published. Lists, when they're registered for every chemical in the list, you can then look at how many lists it's associated with. So in this case, I have a dye of interest. I look at presence in lists, and it shows me every one of those lists it's in. You can see it's interestingly, in hydraulic fracturing fluids. It's been through ToxCast. It's in food. It's in the Canadian substances list, etc., etc. And what we can then do is, if we want to do this for a series of chemicals, for example, I go to the list of azo dyes. I push that set of chemicals, 271 chemicals, out to batch search right here as a list of identifiers. I check which lists I want to see whether those chemicals are in, and I download an Excel file. And here's a list of 271 dyes showing you which ones are in the Canadian domestic substances list, the California OEHA lists, Ecotox, ESP, Universe of Chemicals, our consumer product list, etc. So a very fast way to say, for a list of chemicals, what lists are they in? Similarly, are there any mass spectra available on public domain resources for those dyes? Select the mass spectral list of interest and download, and I can go through to each of those. And I've got a set of water lists, and I'm interested whether or not chemicals, these dyes, are listed as chemicals of interest, and just check those boxes and see where they are present. So a very flexible way to cross linkages, outbound and inbound. So we have this important identifier called the substance identifier, DTXSID. It exists for every substance. That has now made its way onto Wikipedia. So there are inlinks today from Wikipedia, from PubChem, from Unichem, at the European Bioinformatics Institute, from MassBank for mass spectrometry, and from the AOP Wiki, and tens of others of people have harvested our chemistry, taken those DTXSIDs, and have inlinked to our application. Anybody linking in gets to land at a chemical page and take advantage of what we have. Substance identifier is already approved by Wikidata, which is why it is now showing up in Wikipedia. So it will show up in the chemical box or the drug box and as a direct link. So that went through an approval process. It was very short. People appreciated what we were doing with DSS. When we have chemical names, CAS numbers, preferred names, DTXSIDs, INSHI keys, which I didn't have time to cover today, we can now link to these external resources. So a single button click, we can navigate out to other websites for a chemical. As an example, in the past week, we've added the outlink to state-specific water quality standards. Land on the chemical, click on the link, and you will find the state-specific water quality standards for what the levels are of concern in different states, etc. You can find where to buy a chemical using the chemical vendor's linkage to PubChem. You can go directly into the California EPA website. Contributing to data quality, this is what we've been working hard on over the years from 2017 to present day. The curation level has gone from 15,000 manually reviewed records, chemical substance record, to about 47,500. That's a lot of detailed eye work. You can view the level of curation for any chemical by clicking on record information and see which of the 5 levels that chemical. If you see any issues, let us know by submitting comments. So you can click on the contact us and give us some feedback directly. This will land with us and we can review it. At a chemical level, you can also identify issues. You can suggest chemicals to add to lists. You can suggest related chemicals. And as an example, in this case, on this table, there is no result listed. If you click on this, highlight it, you can submit a comment, date stamped, time stamped, tells us what browser you are using. You can give us feedback, give us your email address, and hit submit. We will respond to you. We are getting comments every day at the moment, and at present we've got over 400 comments that have come in where we have resolved those issues and given feedback to the submitter. Prototypes in progress. We'll be very fast here. We've got structure, substructure, similarity searches already in testing internally, and we've been working on this for a while, and it continues to improve in performance, so I can draw a substructure and get the chemicals. We've got structure standardization services, so for every chemical we register, we need to generate MS-ready and another form of chemical standardization called CCTE. We already have single predictions available to you, but we've built a batch prediction tool. So ultimately, when we roll the prototype out and integrate it to the dashboard, I can't give you a timeline on that, you'll be able to upload 1,000 smile strings, 1,000 cast numbers, etc. If you go to the CompTox portal, we've talked about the dashboard. We've talked about the retirement of ToxCast and EDSP21. There is a tile called RapidTox. It's been there for a while. You can get an overview of what this tool is meant to be. And it is meant to be an application that pulls together the chemical data that we have in terms of toxicity and exposure and surfaces it in a different way than we've managed to do to date with the dashboard. And it will integrate various other forms of predictions, utilizing our in vitro data in different ways, utilizing our latest exposure prediction tools. So you don't have access to this at the moment, but we've built it based on a publication from our colleagues Leora Vagosen and Todd Martin. Todd built Test, as I mentioned. So he built an application called the Alternatives Assessment Dashboard. He wrote this publication, published in 2020. We have now morphed that into a new application called the Hazard Comparison Dashboard, and this is simply a view of what this looks like. I've input a set of chemicals, and it has retrieved data from the underlying database for a set of chemicals that includes oral inhalation, eye irritation, skin irritation. This is a heat map of the toxicity data. It includes QSAR modeling predictions using Test, and you can drill down into the underlying data. So watch this space for this story. This is a story very much in progress. What's the next big change? So 5 years and 10 releases, and we've reached the end of this technology architecture. We have chosen to not build on this application any longer. Basically, it was a prototype that kept growing. It served a great purpose. Hopefully it's of value to you, but we're building afresh with a new architecture. There's so much data we need to manage. We need to release on a more frequent basis. So we're building an entire new architecture and data hub to support that with a new user experience, a new UI. First scheduled release for this, it will certainly go live as a beta. We will not switch off the existing version until we have migrated all capabilities, so you'll have access to both. So migrate existing capabilities. We will be able to release data on a more frequent basis, and the existing dashboard, as I say, will remain on. Short-term goals for this, new table widgets, so you can interact with the tables in a better way. We've chosen a widget that will be much richer in capability. We're going to rebuild some of our visualization tools. The architecture is going to be based on what they call web services, which will be made available via a public API to access all of the underlying data. I can't give you a timeline on when that will be rolled out to you, to the public, but that's how we're building so that we ultimately can release a public API. And with this should become more flexible and faster search. We also have one tile left to talk about as an application, that is ACTA. So future integration is the ACTA data will migrate over to the dashboard. If you want to learn more about how this was built, this is the first publication that we put out. It tells you about the thought process we went into pulling this together in the early days. Then it was called the chemistry dashboard because we didn't have bioactivity in there. We didn't have a lot of the exposure data in the way that we have today. So We've morphed it from chemistry to chemicals dashboard. We also have told the story of how we did all of the curation over the years, and this publication is now out, authored by Chris Grolke and Anne Richard, two pivotal people who built the DSS-Tox dashboard database and the chemical registration system. Chris Grolke's massive contribution. And we owe a great debt to all the data you're seeing for the curators who've worked on it for over 20 years. The downloadable data will be updated. That is not there yet, so that will follow in the next few weeks. And in conclusion, so the dashboard has really become our primary web-based tool for delivering data to the community. We have thousands and thousands of daily users at this point. Data growth continues every day, new chemicals, new tox data going in, consumer products mapped in factotum, new predictions, improving our models, and in vitro data being added, but released on a specific cycle. Data curation is absolutely critical to give you the highest quality data. There is no perfect in the world of databases that contain 882,000 chemicals, but we do it every day. We enhance the data quality. These proof of concept applications in development are not yet available to you, but will ultimately be rolled out. From proof of concept, we will migrate them to public prototypes. So watch this space. And then the next release that I mentioned with this full rebuild of the architecture is scheduled for March 2021 at this point. Please feel free to contact me with any questions. I'm Antony without an H. And as I again want to emphasize, I get to give the talk, but I am one small cog, maybe just a drop of lubricant in the engine that makes all of this happen. Open to answering any questions if anything came through.
Gotcha. And yeah, and if anyone has any questions, please feel free to put those in the chat. I'm getting a request from someone to go back to that contact slide real quick, Tony, if you could, or okay. You just probably.
Let me reshare my screen.
Or even like.
Yep, reshare my screen. And okay, I'm wondering if you sync CompTox Chemicals Dashboard updates with the available downloadable data. The available downloadable data will be updated. It is not in sync yet. To push all of the data out will take us some time, especially because of our present remoteness, because a lot of these data sets are incredibly large, and it takes time to generate them and push them to the appropriate platform. But yes, we have that to do. Is there a link of updates, changes that have been made to the dashboard that can serve as a reference? Right at the beginning of my talk, I mentioned the fact that there is available an update list, but if I show you directly on the dashboard, you can go to the page where that is available. So there are release notes available right here. 10th release of the CompTox Chemicals Dashboard. You click on that and it will show you bug fixes that we worked on, as well as new functionality. So that is there. Will a recording be made available? Monica's already answered that. Thank you, Monica. Have you published standards for the representation of structures, especially difficult ones such as tautomers or relative stereochemistry? Great question. We don't set standards. We participate in the adoption and definition of those standards. Standards are very slow moving. I've sat on the UPAC Standards Committee, Division of Chemical Structures. I did that for a number of years. There are a whole set of UPAC structure standards that we commonly adhere to. We like a lot of what are defined there. Sometimes we choose a slightly different approach for the benefit of the community. We adopt a standard in-sheet generation for specific tautomers. We can register specific tautomers, but that needs to be enhanced in the rebuild. I mentioned the rebuild of the dashboard. We're also rebuilding the underlying chemical registration system at the same time. So we want to enhance what we've been able to do with chemical registration. So that is coming up also. So we follow standards rather than define them. If you have any specific examples, Carol, of challenging tautomers or relative or stereochemistry, we do use V3000 mol files. The underlying chemical registration is built on Chemaxon tools, so we can encode relative stereochemistry into the application, into the chemical registration system, and make that available. Abdal asked the question, is it available to the public or EPA only? This is a public resource. Anybody in the world can access this tool. There are no limits, no constraints, no bounds for what you access externally to the EPA, except for the fact that we release every few months the data at the moment. So the internal data is already ahead in terms of number of chemicals versus what you can access. So we did a snapshot at the end of November of 2019 in order to get ready for this release. There's a lot of work that had to happen, and COVID really threw a lot of hurdles in the middle of that. So the snapshot was 2019 November, but we've been adding new chemicals, as I say, every day. So we have thousands of chemicals that you don't have access to yet. They will go public with a future release of the dashboard. So everything you saw, Abdel, you have access to, except for the prototypes that I mentioned, the proof of concept. You're welcome for the presentation. Thank you. If there's no more questions, thank you.
It looks like, so I got a question from a private chat real quick, so let me just read that out to you. So it's saying, regarding the GHS classifications, what happens if there are conflicting data, such as multiple studies with oral LD50s that would lead to different categories?
That's a great question. So rather than answer it, I'm going to let the data speak for itself. So as I mentioned, we are pulling the data for the safety data directly from PubChem. PubChem has had to do the heavy lift of dealing with that particular question. How do you represent multiple colliding GHS categorizations of a particular chemical? So they've done that by putting them all into the system. So I believe the GHS data for atrazine comes from 6 different classifications. So this is EU regulation, and this is European Chemicals Agency. So these are consistent. But as we go down, you may see differences. Oh, no, so we've dropped one. So this is the Australian system. This is the Hazardous Substance Data Bank. So you have 2 consistent here, or separate one here. So they're all there. And we are not the decider in regards to which is the most appropriate. We're surfacing all of the data. These regulatory authorities have all made these particular calls, and PubChem have harvested and integrated, and we're taking advantage of that. So hopefully that answered that question. Okay, with 1 minute to go, thank you for giving us an hour of your time. I'm sure you're all Zoom tired, Connect tired, Microsoft Teams tired, whatever the tool you've been using for video conferencing. I'm sure you're all tired of it. So to grant us an hour of your time to learn what we've done with this release, it's much appreciated. Please send any questions directly to my contact email, and stay safe and healthy, and thank you for your time.
All right, thanks everybody, and thanks Tony for a great presentation.